Okay, did you think that Donald Trump's attempt to get a $400 million airplane from Qatar couldn't get worse? Spoiler alert, here's Trump tonight telling the origin story of the $400 million plane on Fox.
When we landed, we parked right next to the 747 of Qatar. And we parked next, there was another 747, two or three of them, which the Arab world has. And when you look at a new 747 and you look at a plane that's 42 years old, not even the same plane, the other ones are bigger and sleeker and sharper, and it doesn't look right. And he said, great gentleman, Tamim, he said, I would like to help if you want. I said, how can you help? Well, we happen to have a plane. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, you have been, and he doesn't mean me, although I have been good. He means our country. And he said, your country has been very good to us. I would love to do something to help with this situation you have with Air Force One. I said, that's nice. What do you suggest? And he suggested this. And I said, you know what? That's very nice. That's very nice. I appreciate it. What would be the price? He said, there is no price. I said, that's nice. I made a good deal. We need a plane for a couple of years before we get the other ones, because Boeing is very late.
So if you're actually the president of the United States and somebody gives you a free thing like that, it's not indicative of the fact that you made a good deal. It's actually just indicative of the fact that you're the president of the United States and you have a lot of power and people know how you work. The president of the United States is not actually going to be allowed to ride around in an interim Qatari hand-me-down jet while a new Air Force One is being built. For a lot of very specific military and security reasons, the Air Force Ones take a long time to build because of the extensive security required to carry a president. I mean, they've got evasive maneuvers and they can refuel in the air. This is just, it's not just a normal fancy plane. Outfitting that Qatari jet to be an Air Force One could reportedly cost up to $1 billion. I've seen a lot of estimates, but they're in the several hundred million to $1 billion. Donald Trump said no price, because there's no price for Trump if he can get the American taxpayer to pay for it. There's so much more to unpack in that scene that Trump described, which we'll discuss in a moment. Trump's explanation comes after spending days being dazzled by dictator palaces in the repressive Middle Eastern countries en route back to the United States and all the pesky frustrations of the fact that back home he's got this liberal democracy. Sputtering though it may be, it's still a liberal democracy. He doesn't seem too happy about it. Maybe that's why he spent today on Truth Social lashing out at his Republican allies in Congress and on the Supreme Court who defied him today. And also, by the way, at Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift. Trump raged at Springsteen for speaking out against him on Wednesday night in England.
A majority of our elected representatives have failed to protect the American people from the abuses of an unfit president and a rogue government. They have no concern or idea of what it means to be deeply American.
Now, in fairness, Trump and Springsteen are both, Springsteen and Taylor Swift are both billionaires. Unlike Trump, however, or the petrostate royals, these two earned their fortunes. Springsteen and Swift became rich through their talent and their hard work, not through crypto schemes and influence scams and fraudulent universities and steak. Trump also went after the Republican-led Supreme Court, which ruled against him again today. Quote, the Supreme Court is being played by the radical left losers who have no support, and the public hates them, and their only hope is the intimidation of the court itself. We can't let that happen to our country, end quote. 7-2 ruling on the Supreme Court, by the way. Majority of people on that court support Donald Trump. All of this comes after wrapping up a foreign trip where the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, ostensibly, Donald Trump, appeared much, much more comfortable in the company of unelected strongmen than with America's Democratic allies. In the United Arab Emirates, Trump gushed about how beautiful everything was, oblivious or indifferent to that country's record of repression and censorship. Trump praised the dictator of Qatar and fawned over ceremonial camels. Carried on a lot about these camels, by the way. In Saudi Arabia, Trump was mesmerized by the pageantry, blinded by the gold, the guards. Said nothing about the mass executions or people jailed in Saudi Arabia for dissent. As the New York Times writes in its piece about the local reaction to Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, quote, it's impossible to accurately determine what proportion of Saudis have positive views of Mr. Trump. Cultural norms favor public conformity. And Prince Mohammed has intensified political repression while expanding social freedoms. As a result, many Saudis are reluctant to share their true views in public. The son of a prominent cleric imprisoned in Saudi Arabia castigated Mr. Trump for what he described as whitewashing the reputation of Prince Mohammed, who he said was an authoritarian leader who has brutally silenced all dissent, end quote. Listen for yourself as Donald Trump played lackey to the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who, according to U.S. intelligence, ordered the dismemberment and murder of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi during Trump's first term.
We have great partners in the world, but we have none stronger and nobody like the gentleman that's right before me. He's your greatest representative. And if I didn't like him, I'd get out of here so fast.
He says, I like him. He actually said, I think I like him too much. And for anyone suggesting this was strictly business, because it was a business trip, remember that most of the quote unquote deals that Trump touted were finalized under the Biden administration. The Washington Post reports as Air Force One touched down in the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates, the White House released daily lists of the dozens of deals that it said Trump had secured during his visits. But at least half of the dozen of the contracts were announced before Trump even took office in January. Here's one example the Post gave. Quote, the administration announced $8.5 billion in projects involving the Texas energy company McDermott. Except the company previously announced contracts for that initiative during Joe Biden's presidency in 2023 and 2024, end quote. This fawning praise wasn't some strategic negotiating tactic. It was a fraudulent attempt to take credit for Biden's record and much more importantly, a way to cozy up to corrupt leaders and perhaps pick a new plane or a golf course or a crypto deal, maybe even a Trump Tower in Damascus in return.